Hey everybody. I was watching a YouTube video by a guy named Larry Lawton. If you haven't seen Larry, you should check out his channel. It's really cool. He is an ex-con. He's a former jewel thief. And so he does things like take clips from movies with famous bank heists and everything and critique the realism of the scenes and what they got right, what they didn't get right about bank robbery and that sort of thing. It's very interesting stuff. He's a very interesting character. He talks a lot about his experiences in prison, about kind of turning his life around and everything. But he had one video that was 5 things that I watched just now that was 5 things, unwritten rules about traffic stops or police stops. And he had a lot of good advice, a little bit of which I'm going to reiterate here. But, you know, I worked for the police as a dispatch officer from 2010 to 2012. And so I actually know a little bit about how police stops are supposed to work. And so I'm going to give you some tips. I'm not going to number them. These will just be as they're coming to me. But I'm going to give you some information about what to do in a traffic stop that hopefully, you know, can be some small token of effort to kind of turn the tide on what's been going on lately, because so much of this, so much of these incidences that we're dealing with lately were things having to do with police stops and traffic stops and that sort of thing. And it is so crucial, so incredibly crucial that you know what to do in these situations, regardless of your race, regardless of the race of the cops, because there are certain things that if you know them, not only will they keep you alive or help guarantee that you stay alive at the very least, but they just may actually help you beat the ticket. And these things are crucially important to know. So the first piece of advice, and it may sound rather obvious, but it very much bears repeating: don't break the law. Just don't break the law, period. And that's why in this discussion, I'm not going to, you know, it's possible to do, but I'm not going to tell you how to, you know, throw off a breathalyzer test or anything like that. Because as far as I'm concerned, like, if you're driving drunk, you're a danger to yourself and others, and the police have not only a right but a responsibility to get you off the road. And I also think that that's something you should be prosecuted for. You know, it's going to cost, if you've got money to go out to the bars and get wasted, you've got money for an Uber. So it costs a lot, you know, get an Uber out, get an Uber back, and it costs a lot less to do that than it does to you know, than it does to be found guilty of a DUI, be charged, you know, as much as $10,000, get up to a year in prison. It's much, you know, it's much more preferable to deal with that. And it's much more preferable to get an Uber than it is to be charged and possibly convicted with things like vehicular manslaughter and stuff like that. So, yeah, for God's sake, if you're driving drunk, I'm not going to help you. None of this will help you. If you're drunk, period. But there are situations where the cops behave inappropriately, and there are situations where the cops, you know, either for malicious reasons or for just, you know, possible incompetence or just not thinking about things. Cops are human too. They may bungle some things, and it's important to know when they're bungling things and why they're asking you to do the things that they're asking you to do. Okay. The first thing after, you know, don't break the law, and I say this, by the way, one of the things that got me thinking about this, I don't have the name in front of me right now. It's very easy information to find if you Google it. There was recently a young man, I think he was underage, that was shot to death by the police because they thought he was brandishing a weapon in a public area, I believe a public park. And what had happened was, it was a toy gun, and he had sawed off the orange cap on the toy gun that is required to be there by law so that the police know that it's a toy. He sawed that off so that people would think it was a real gun. He got, you know, he got his wish. He wanted them to think he had a real gun, and they did. And I know the immediate thing that comes in is people saying, oh, so you're saying he deserved to die. No, he didn't deserve to die, which is why he shouldn't have sawed the orange cap off of the gun. I'm not saying that doing that was, I am not suggesting that sawing the orange cap off the gun was should have been necessarily a death sentence. I don't think it should have been. I'm saying you are being a dumbass and putting yourself in harm's way when you do things like that. Don't break the law. And I know if he was a minor, then his mother and father needed to be on top of that shit. They needed to know it's their responsibility to know why that orange cap is there and make sure that their son keeps that on the gun. That's their responsibility. So if there's anybody to blame in that situation, it's the parents. Anyway, moving forward, when the police pull you over, be courteous. I don't care what kind of chip you have on your shoulder about the police. Be courteous. The police when they pull you over, they are running a script. And as long as they are following the script, you follow the script. And if they stop, I'm going to tell you what to say if they stop following the script. But as long as they're following the script, you follow the script, and that includes if they try to take you in. I'm going to talk about resisting arrest in a minute, but for now, just know, for God's sake, if you want to help understand, try to walk a mile in that cop's shoes for a minute. I know that CNN is pushing and all the cable news outlets are pushing the narrative right now that cops just drive around the country killing black people, but in reality, that's not what's happening. In reality, police officers I should say that's not all that's happening. In reality, police officers have a lot that they have to deal with. And contrary to what the news is telling you, police officers are not necessarily good people or bad people. They're just people that have a job to do. And that job includes being privy to things that, if you saw them, you would need to go home, lock all your doors, hide under the sheets, and call your therapist instantly. The cop that pulls you over, for all you know, he was the first responder on a scene earlier that day where, a guy shot his wife and kid and then shot himself, and he walks into the living room and he has to kick open the door and there's blood and guts all over all over everything in the living room or something. Or he was involved in a high-speed chase, or he was part of a standoff in a hostage negotiation, or any of these other disturbing, traumatizing, high-tension, high-adrenaline situations. And you know what happens? He doesn't get, after he deals with that, he doesn't get a mug of hot cocoa and a blanket and a trip to the day spa to cool down. He has to get right back in his car and go deal with the next thing. And if the next thing is your dumb bullshit, he's probably not going to be real thrilled about it. There's a good chance that he's going into that situation angry, tense, adrenalized, terrified, nauseated, any number of internal things that he is trying to suppress so that he can be patient and come deal with you. And I know you may not like the cops. I'm not crazy about the cops. I've worked for them, and it is kind of like, they say once you've worked in food preparation, you'll never want to eat out again. It's the same kind of thing. I've seen how bad it can be, but I also know what's going on. And if you can go into that situation when you get pulled over, go into and if you don't feel comfortable, you can. Larry Lawton talked about this. You are within your rights to record the situation. Get a recorder going, broadcast it on the internet, broadcast it on Facebook Live. You're within your rights to do that. But go into the situation with the attitude, as terrifying as it is, as aggravating as it is, go into the situation with the attitude of, this guy has a difficult job, and I'm gonna help him do it. If he wants to put you in handcuffs and put you in the squad car, go into that part of it with, I'm gonna help this guy get through this difficult situation. Believe it or not, if you go into it with that mindset, you have no idea how much of a difference that will make for the cop. One time, I got pulled over in the Virginia Highlands area here in Atlanta, and I had changed lanes when I shouldn't have, and in so doing, I cut off the police officer. But I was courteous to him, and when he came over and asked me, "Do you know what you did?" And I said, "What was that?" And we'll get into that, by the way, in a second. But I was courteous to him. I gave him all my information, and he explained what I did. I gave him all my license, registration, all of that. He went and ran the stuff, came back, and he said, "Okay, here's the thing. I checked. You do have current registration, but you handed me an out-of-date, expired ID or expired insurance registration. So here's this. At this date, just go down. It's not even a ticket that he gave me. It's just go down to the courthouse and go down. Well, I mean, it was a ticket, but it was not like a summons to appear in court. It was just to resolve this issue. But anyway, he said just go down to the courthouse, show them the correct information. They'll throw this out, and that's all they need. All they need to see. And I said, will do. Thank you. And the reason I said thank you is because he gave me important information that I needed, which was that I was driving on an expired insurance card. That is good information. I needed to know that, and I needed to know that, and I am thankful and I appreciate that he gave me that information, because I would much rather get it from him than be in a situation where I'm the at-fault driver in a head-on collision and I have to stand there and hand that officer bad insurance information. So anyway, I said thank you because he corrected me in an area where I needed to be corrected. I was respectful. I was not kissing his ass. I was not sucking up to him, but I was just decent and respectful. And he actually said, "Thanks for being cool about all of this." And I said, "No problem, man." And it's funny, I had a King Diamond album in the back seat of my car. The twitching, by the way, is from the workout earlier. But I had a King Diamond album along with some other CDs piled up in the back of my car. And he said, "I love that King Diamond album." It was the House of God album. And so I thought that was cool, and he let me go. He could have thrown the book at me. He could have busted me for merging, for cutting him off, for all of that stuff. But I was decent. And now I know, again, the current media narrative is, yeah, it was a white cop and I'm white. And I know the media narrative now is that when a white cop pulls over a white person, we do the secret white person handshake and, he leaves and we forget the whole thing ever happened. But no, in reality, actually, white cops will arrest white people too. And so that's important information to have. That's important to know. Now, the next thing to remember is getting into what I said earlier, and Larry Lawton talked about this in his video too. If you are pulled over, don't snitch on yourself. Never, ever tell the police officer what you did wrong, because if you tell them why they pulled you over, then you're confessing to it. If you say no, they will turn around. They will say, "Oh, so you weren't aware that you did X, Y, and Z." Don't ever do that. If they say, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Say, "Why?" Or "Why did you pull me over?" And don't, just say that. Don't argue about it, but don't confess to anything. Make them do the talking. See, police will deny this up and down, but I'll tell you it's true. They have a quota. They have a quota for how many people they're supposed to pull over every month, how many tickets they're supposed to give every month. So they will try to entrap you into as much stupid bullshit as possible, so that they can give you They can give you as many tickets as they want or as they need to. So don't snitch on yourself. Make them do the talking, and remember, always remember. The Miranda rights don't start when they read them to you. They're always in effect, rather. They don't ever start. They're always in effect. So you have the right to remain silent. If you give up that right, anything you say can and will be used against you. Don't ever underestimate that. Don't ever underestimate how far that will go. And then, so the next thing is, You need to know that if the cops pull you over, they cannot, if they are going to flash the lights, they have to have seen you committing a crime. I was driving down in East Point, Atlanta one time. One night, I turned the wrong way on a one-way street, and cop pulled me over. Pulls up behind me, pulls me over. He gets out of the car, knocks on the glass. I roll down. He said, "License and registration." And I said, "May I ask what this is in regards to?" And he said, "Oh, you went the wrong way on a one-way street." And the look on his face, I immediately saw a look of recognition of like, oh, like he just realized he screwed up the procedure. Okay, if the cop has realized, you don't tell him, don't throw it in his face, don't try to play gotcha, just let him naturally realize that he messed up the procedure. Because if he messed up the procedure, now he knows that he doesn't want to go to court with that being the sequence of events. He knows that if he goes to court, he's going to look bad. So don't, like I said, don't shove his face in it, just let him realize. And he said, "Oh, you went the wrong way on a one-way street." And I said, "Oh, okay." And I gave him my stuff. And again, remaining courteous, let me off with a verbal warning. He said, he made the thing like, "Yeah, a lot of people." I said, "Do you live in the area?" I was like, "No, I live up north." And he's like, "Yeah, a lot of people make this mistake. Anyway, just get back on the blah, blah, blah and let me go." It could be that he would have done that anyway. But but just the fact that, he realized that he botched something very big. Now, if a police officer is refusing to tell you why they pulled you over, or they start asking you questions, remember, every question they ask you is designed to further entrap you. So if they start asking you questions that you don't feel comfortable answering, or when you get to a point where you don't feel comfortable answering their questions, you say, "I have nothing to say. Am I under arrest or am I free to go?" And you can say it more, what you want to do is you want to couch it in more respectful language than that. You always want to say something like, "Officer, I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but I feel like at this point I should say, am I under arrest or am I free to go?" And now at that point they may arrest you, but if they're holding you up over stupid bullshit, they may just say, "Okay, get this taken care of," or, "Have a nice day," or something like that. So when cops are asking you questions, it's important to realize it's important to realize what you need to say where. Because here's the thing: you can convey to a police officer that everything's okay. Like if a police officer says, "What are you up to this evening?" You can just say, "Well, I was just doing this, that, or the other, out for a drive," something like that. If it sounds inconsequential, if what you were doing was inconsequential, then there's nothing wrong with telling them what you were doing. Or I should say, if it sounds inconsequential, then there's generally nothing wrong with telling them what you were doing. If they start probing beyond that, if they start looking for more information beyond just a surface level, just say respectfully, "Officer, with all due respect, I have nothing else to say. Am I under arrest or am I free to go?" Okay, the next thing you need to know is that you have the right to refuse a search. The police cannot search your vehicle without probable cause. And you need to look into what constitutes probable cause. If they can see or smell marijuana or any other controlled substance, then that can be taken as probable cause. There are a few other things, but one thing that they can do is, of course, get the canine unit out there to search your vehicle. So I had an interesting situation with this one time. It was in 2013. I had been up at Lead Belly Studios, which is in North Georgia, all day, and I dropped off the other guitar player in the band at his home, which was in Roswell. I was driving home. I started to make a bad left turn, realized what I was doing, and got back on the right track. Police officer pulled me over anyway, and he said, "Are you drunk?" And I said, "Have you been drinking?" I said, "No." And he said he looked in my car. There was all kinds of trash in my car. So he looks at the trash in my car and he thinks, well, this guy's covering stuff up. He thinks you can tell he's looking at it thinking the trash is covering up a pound of cocaine or something like that. Like he's working those gears. And so he says, okay, why don't you get out of the car? And so I get out, and he says, okay, I need you to know the K9 unit is on its way. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to come clean with me now. If you have drugs in your car, I'm going to, or you are intoxicated, I'm going to give you an opportunity to come clean with me now. And at this point, one thing you can do is take a look at the age of the police officer that has pulled you over, and if it is a really, really young cop, these guys have a tendency, like the guys that are in their early 20s, they're right out of the academy, they have a tendency to be like Dudley Do-Right Boy Scout type cops. They want to prove themselves, and they are going to so they have an extra impetus to try to, his goal. This guy was his goal. You could tell was like he thought he was going to get a huge drug bust or something like that. But and this was he was a black cop, by the way. I mean, I wouldn't bring up the races except that it's pertinent to the current discussion. So this is a black cop. It was up in Roswell. He pulls me out. He gets me to leave the car. Check in your local area. Different precincts have different rules about whether or not it's legal for a cop to order you to leave the vehicle. Certain precincts, if your license and registration is in order, then they can't order you to leave the vehicle. But anyway, I got out of the car. He tells me the K9 unit's on its way. Well, here's the thing. This is where me knowing how police procedure actually works pays off, because he pulls me over. He has pulled me over. I know that you cannot call for a K9 unit before you have actually spoken to the person and established a reason to call the K9 unit, because guess what? There's not unlimited K9 units. They don't have time to go around sniffing out every single car. You have to check out the vehicle, check out the person, go back to the car, or go back to your car, radio for a K9 unit, and then the K9 unit's on its way. So he comes out, he has not gone back to his car at all. He has gotten me out of the car, and he said, and I've been looking at him the whole time. He hasn't radioed or anything like that. He just tells me the K9 unit's on its way. K9 unit is not on its way. And remember, police can lie to you. That's why that whole thing about, in the movies you see they ask the cop, are you a cop? And he's, to see if somebody's undercover and everything. No, they can lie to you the whole time. And so police can lie to you. It's actually, they are within their rights to lie to you. So I know this guy's lying to me. Do I cop an attitude with him? No. Do I say, look, you're just some young buck out of the academy that's trying to make a name for yourself? Or do I argue with him at all? No. What I say, I said, no, I said, officer, I'm not under the influence of any substances. And he goes, really? And in this way, it's like, oh, come on, bro, really? And it's like, no, I'm really not. Now, the next thing he tells me, I'm going to give you an opportunity to come clean to me before the police find something. No, that's bullshit. First of all, I mean, I didn't have any drugs in the car, so it doesn't matter. But that's bullshit. That's absolute bullshit. Why would it matter? You're confessing to a crime. You're still confessing to a crime. And you're not, don't let them think that you're going to get some kind of leniency by going ahead and confessing. You're not. They're still going to throw the book at you. They're still going to hold that up as evidence of you confessing to a crime. So don't ever think that. But anyway, so I know that the K9 unit is not on its way. So I just said, officer, I don't mean to make your life difficult or anything, but I know at this point I'm supposed to say I don't consent to searches. And he says he drops the attitude at that point and says, that's fine. That's fine when the K9 unit gets here. If the K9 unit finds anything, I'll have probable cause to search the vehicle. And I said, I understand. And he said, okay. And then he said, why don't you go back and wait in your car? It's cold out. So I go back and I wait in my car. Now, when I sit down in that car, I sit down with both hands on my lap like this, looking straight ahead, and I sit this way without moving for about 10 minutes. And I don't do jack shit. I just sit there and motionless for about 10 minutes. And why did I do that? Because when he tells you to go wait in your car, go sit back in your vehicle. He's watching you, and he's trying to establish probable cause. And he's sitting there watching you in the vehicle, waiting. He's waiting for me to go, start checking through shit, looking for things, checking this, that, or the other, so he can come over and say, what were you looking at? What were you getting into? Why did you open the sun visor? Why did you open the glove box? Anything like that. He's waiting to see if I'll start checking for shit, looking through shit. And that can be used as probable cause. So knowing that, I sit there motionless. And again, keep in mind, I know this guy's sitting, I know this guy's right there. He still hasn't radioed. He still hasn't gotten back on the radio. And so he comes back and he gives me my IDs, my ID and my registration back. And he says, okay, I'm going to let you off with a verbal warning. Now, be very, very careful. You could have, killed somebody with that turn you made, so just be very careful. Where are you going? And I said, I just need to get back on the highway. He said, okay, I want you to go up there and make this turn. So, have a nice evening. Thank you. Good evening. I shot him the bird in my brain, but I didn't, I was courteous the whole time. I made exactly the turn he told me to make. And when he was gone, that was it. And that gets me to the next thing. Be mindful. Be mindful of the fact of how you leave a traffic stop. The cop is still watching you. So if he tells you to drive off a certain way, drive off that way. Follow his directions, because he's still watching you. So that's very important. All of those things are extremely important. And like I said, the most important thing is making sure that if the officer does not have probable cause, then make sure that he knows he does not have the right to search the vehicle. Because you know what? I didn't have any drugs in the car, but I'm a professional musician. I've given I may have at some point given a ride to somebody that had drugs in his possession, and if his bag of whatever falls out of his pocket and lands in my floorboard, I'm in possession, whether I know it or not. So that's why you hear people go to court, man, I got hit with this thing and the drugs weren't even mine. Yeah, that's what happens, because when it's in your car, it's possession. Your car is your car is your property. They don't have the right to search your property without probable cause or without a warrant. So bear all of that information in mind. And those are just some very basic, very important things that you need to know. Know when you have the right to refuse a search. Know when you have the right to terminate an encounter with the police. And for God's sakes, don't act a fool. That's if you take nothing away from this. If you get arrested, you will have your day in court. You will have your day in court, and that's why I have a problem with all of these news outlets that are saying, "Oh, well, everything's rigged against you. The whole system's rigged against you," and all this. It's like a system that is rigged against you, fundamentally rigged against you, isn't going to do. It does not function like our system. Our system is not perfect. Our system can be fucked up. Our system can be manipulated. But our system fundamentally is set up to give you innocence until you are proven guilty. Even countries like, look at Japan, for example. Japan, which has a 99% conviction rate. And those convictions, the vast majority of those convictions are based on the accused person confessing. So it doesn't take a lot of internal mathematics to realize that these people are being pressured into confessing by the police, that the police are extorting those confessions from them. It does not take a great deal of mental acuity to figure that out. You have a system where you are guaranteed a day in court, and if you get arrested and you get arrested or you get a ticket and you have to go to court, get a lawyer. Period. People. Now I know this is where people come in and say, people will come in and say, "Oh, but Jordan, people, especially poor blacks in impoverished neighborhoods, don't have the money for an attorney." Yes, you do. There are people that will represent. There are people that will represent low-income families pro bono. Lawyers that will. Don't rely. Do not rely on a court-appointed attorney. They may do fine. I had a court-appointed attorney one time for a traffic thing. He did just fine. Well, he didn't have to do anything because the complaining party didn't show up to court, and so the whole case got thrown out. But you know, they may be just fine, but 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be the best representation you could get. You can get an attorney there. You can find an attorney in your area. You know, my attorney, for example, he charges $250 for, and please don't make it. This is not to make it sound like I go to traffic court all the time. I actually have not seen my traffic attorney, in years, and I intend to keep it that way. But but anyway, you know, my attorney charges $250 per case, per day in court. And 9 times out of 10, you're only going to need to go to court one time to resolve it. Just the fact that you showed up with an attorney, a lot of times is enough to get them to dismiss it. Because remember, the business that they're in that courtroom, the business they're in is getting you to pay that ticket, getting you to pay. And they want you to confess to it and just pay it, and most people will do that. Most people don't care to fight it. That issue where I went to court that I just described, where the people didn't show up, I was taken to court for a traffic incident, and I had never pled not guilty to. I had never entered a plea of any kind before, but I went to court the first day. The first day, I thought, you know, they'll give you a piece of paper that says, do you want a nolo, which means nolo contendere, means I'm not confessing, but I'm also not admitting to it. I'm just not disputing it one way or the other. Or do you want to enter not guilty or not guilty? Nolo you can only do every 5 years, so it's very important to keep that in your back pocket as much as you can. But anyway, you know, I entered a plea of not guilty. I thought that day was what was going to happen. No, it turns out they say, well, you have to come back at this date. I entered not guilty, come back at this date. I come back, and now I have to fill out some paperwork to announce my intention to plead not guilty. So this is the second time I'm coming down. I have to take a day off work, or a morning off work at least, to come do this, to come deal with this shit. And so I fill out that paperwork, give it to them, and they say, okay, you'll be arraigned on this day. I come in on this day for my arraignment. That's where I'm assigned my court-appointed attorney. I come in that day for my arraignment. I finally enter the not guilty plea. Then they say, okay, your trial date is set for this. I get there. The other people did not show up. They throw the whole thing out. The other people didn't show up. The officer didn't show up. They throw the whole thing out. That was it. And so the only thing I ended up owing $250 to that attorney for all of his representation, but that was it. So that's something that most people don't know about, is when you're going in there for one of those municipal violations, like a traffic violation or something, they're going to make the process as difficult as possible to enter that not guilty plea, because what they want you to do is say, fuck it, here's my guilty plea, just like get this shit over with. That's what they're operating off of. So if you go in there the first day with your attorney, it is very, the magic can be worked. Your attorney will go over to the DA and talk to them, and they'll work something out, and he'll come back over and say, okay, we've gotten it reduced from a 5-point penalty with $500 fine to a $100 fine and no points on your license, and no points on your license, and you don't have to enter a plea, and you'll plead guilty under these guaranteed terms, and you're done, and that's it. And again, that's a lot better than getting run through the system. So if you show up at court that first day with your attorney, that can make all the difference in the world. And people are going to come back and say, oh, but people from low income, whatever. No, stop it. Okay. Put some money aside. Find an attorney. If you don't have an attorney, go get an attorney right now. Get an attorney. I know exactly who I'm calling if I ever get arrested. Okay? Go get an attorney and have some money put aside for legal fees, for at least the consultation, at least the first day in court. Have that money put aside so that if you get pulled over and you get pulled over, I've never been arrested, by the way, but if you get pulled over and you get a ticket, you get a bullshit ticket. I'll give you an example. One time I was driving down in Clayton County and I made one bad left turn. Cop pulled me over, gave me 3 tickets for one bad left turn, and there were 3 different reasons. It boiled down. I was not in the right at all, but he found 4 different ways to charge me for making one bad left turn. Well, again, most people are like, why don't you just pay it and get it over with? Because it would have been like 17 points on my license. So I get my attorney. We go down to the Clayton County Courthouse, and he goes right up to him and says, look, you have him charged, you've charged him 3 times in the same bracket. You can't charge him 3 times for the same crime. They said, good point. You know, we will waive if he pays a $200 fine, we'll waive the whole thing. And so I paid the fine. The judge, when I went up to the bench, or went up to the podium, the judge says, you have an excellent driving record and an excellent attorney. I thought that was going to give me kind of a, look like that. Yep, sorry. And that was that. Have an attorney. Have money set aside for your attorney. You don't, it's just like you don't need car insurance until you wreck the car. You don't need an attorney until you need to go to court. So if you ever are arrested, know who you're going to call. Know who you're going to call if you get arrested. That when they give you that one phone call, know who it is. Already know call your lawyer first and your mom second. You call that attorney and you get that straightened out. And here's the thing. That's going to give you something else that you need. Something else very important when you get arrested. You notice how many of things, the Rayshard Brooks thing, how many of these incidences are that go tragic, how many of them are connected to resisting arrest, to people who freak the fuck out when they get the handcuffs clapped on them. How many cases are like that, when people freak out when they realize, oh my God, I'm being arrested? Okay, knowing who you're going to call is going to have a very important effect on you. Because if you know what you're going to do, if you have a plan, what did the Joker say in The Dark Knight? People don't freak out when things go according to plan. They freak out when the plan goes bad. And so if you have a plan, you know what happens next. You're going to stay calm. You're going to be chill. You're not going to be freaking the fuck out. You're not going to give the cops a reason to come after you. That is crucially important. Come after you meaning attack you or something. You're going to be calm. You're going to know what the next step is. And trust, always trust, that you will have your day in court. That is so important. Anyway, so that information, that is all good information that I just wanted to put out there. Do my whatever little thing I can to try to help these things. And finally, just remember, if the cops decide to arrest you, just understand, if the cops decide to arrest you, you're not going to change their mind. Okay? That's the last piece of information. Oh, actually, I have one more after that. But if the cops decide to arrest you, you will not change their mind ever, period. Forget about it. Just let it go. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Just forget the idea that you can change the mind of the police when they've decided to arrest you. If you are under arrest, you are under that arrest until they no longer have the legal jurisdiction to hold you, which in most precincts is 24 hours. Usually they will let you out before then. After they just want to process you and get you the fuck out of there, get out on bail or whatever. But you may feel like freaking out. You may think that they're being assholes. You may think that they're wrong or whatever. No matter whatever reason, once you hear those words, you are under arrest. Those words are your God, the light and the way, true God, light from light, true God from true God, begotten not made, of one being with the Father. All of that, those words are your God. Submit to them. don't ever resist arrest. Period. I don't care how in the right you are. Anyway, now when you are taken in, if they try to question you, say at that point, remember, you have the right to remain silent. So if they start questioning you, you say, "I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say. I want to speak to an attorney." And they'll say, "Do you have?" They'll say, "Do you have? Who's your attorney?" We'll contact him or something like that. Preferably, they should let you call him, but call your attorney and say, I have nothing to say. I want to speak to an attorney." If they make you talk to a court-appointed attorney or a state attorney like that, the attorney there's a chance the attorney may come in and try to get you to take a dive. He may try to get you to cop a plea bargain right then and there. Court-appointed attorneys are there to do things like that. They are working for the state first. They will give you legal advice. They will give you hopefully good legal advice, but they are working for the state. That's why I said you need to have your own attorney on standby at all times. Now, again, those are the most important things that you need to know if you are stopped by the cops and if you are arrested by the cops. There is no guarantee that things will go perfectly, but that information, look into that, and then there are video courses online you can take about the right way to handle a traffic stop. If you know everything, and no, this is not something that specifically black people need to know. Every single person of every color needs to know all of this shit. Learn everything, the ins and the outs of the legal ins and the outs of a traffic stop. It's the number one area where most people in their lives will have to deal with the police in a contentious manner, and do that. Learn about that. There is another video that I want to make. Another video I want to make at some point. I have had specifically two encounters with police officers in my life that I am certain were racially motivated. Black police officers coming after me because they had a chip on their shoulder about white people. I know that's a controversial point of view, and if I make that video, I am not making it to try to change the narrative. All I am trying to say with it is that I know what it's like to be targeted because of your race, and it will probably be a controversial video. If I make it, I'm not trying to negate anybody's lived experiences. I'm just trying to add to it. I'm not trying to say that the cops are okay. The situation with the cops is okay. I'm trying to say that it's worse than you think it is. So hopefully that understanding will come through. Anyway, peace.